Welcome to our Leaders Like Us campaign of interviews with our mentors as part of the overall vision for our development program. This is a great opportunity to share their corporate career stories, tips and hints with all our mentees and young people across the country. We'd like to help young people of all backgrounds feel inspired to succeed, gain insights and access to a diverse set of corporate leaders that they feel they can relate to. This interview is with an executive VP at Unilever, based in their London headquarters. Unilever is one of the leading global companies in the consumer goods sector, with sales of more than 50 billion euros and 155,000 employees as at 2019. Unilever brands include many of the world's best known in food, home and personal care, such as Ben & Jerry's, Persil and Lynx. There are career entry points for graduates and apprentices with exciting opportunities across a number of technical fields such as finance, marketing and operations. At a company like Unilever, you have the chance to have a varied career, experiencing a number of different functions such as digital marketing, and of course, traveling and living in different countries and continents is a real possibility as you progress in the company. Rahul Welde, Executive VP at Unilever, is one of our charity's mentors, and here he tells us about his career story, being one of strong family values and belief in each other. This is a story around having big dreams, the importance of aiming high, and trying different things while developing the resilience needed to succeed in the long run. Thank you for interviewing, and we're delighted, honored to interview you today for our Migrant Leaders Like Us campaign. Rahul, as you know, our Leaders Like Us campaign is all about bringing relatable models, role models to our young people so that they can see that there are relatable role models in the corporates and that the young people that we work with today as our mentees can indeed be leaders of tomorrow. So thank you, we are honored to interview you.
My pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. With that in mind, Rahul, tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'm originally from India. I grew up in India my entire life and pretty much did all my education in India right up to post-graduation. I did my BCom and then subsequently the MBA degree in India before I started working. So I grew up with in a modest background. My father used to work in a pharmaceutical company. My mother was an accountant, and we were a family. I have a younger brother who was 4 years younger than me. So we were a small middle class happy family, and that's how my upbringing was. And I learned quite a lot just growing up in an environment which was quite fertile, I would say, for just being joyful, happy, and being quite focused in a manner of speaking on doing a number of things. Of course, education was an important part, but there were a ton of other things that we engaged in, whether it was sports, whether it was getting involved in activities like debating and other leadership positions. So throughout school and college, there was always something that I was extremely busy with. And that is how I would characterize my childhood. Happy and busy was how it was, regardless of what was happening around us.
So excellent training, excellent variety of activities for you to get a feel for what you enjoy and what you're good at. Did your parents have any aspirations for you in terms of the field you would go into?
Oh yes, growing up as a child, I was quite focused about becoming a fighter pilot in the Indian Air Force. So that was a single focused goal that I had all throughout growing up, and I'd say up until finishing my college. And it was also my father's aspiration that I join the Air Force or the Army. We pretty much, therefore, certainly I did not consider for a long period of time any other alternate career. So it was just very focused on doing that. And I trained myself to try and become a fighter pilot in the Indian Air Force.
And you've spent 30 years having an illustrious career in Unilever, both in Unilever, Hindustan and the UK. What are your reflections on that?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, since I grew up with a particular aspiration and quite clearly it did materialize, and that's why I found myself in the corporate world. Um, and one of the earliest lessons, therefore, I learned very early, even before I started my career, was actually just to be able to accept failure and overcome it. Because having grown up with a dream of being a fighter pilot, when that dream did not materialize because I did not pass a particular exam, which I had to for the Indian Air Force, the world actually came crashing down on me. It just seemed like everything was over and I was never going to make it. And that is when then I had to pull myself up, and my father was very supportive, although it was a big I have to say he was usually disappointed for obvious reasons, because he also nourished the dream with me. But as we then as I look back, I think that taught me to be able to bounce back with resilience. And then of course I did my MBA and then subsequently joined Unilever in India.
So the theme that comes across is resilience and family being central to the support that everyone needs. In your view, in today's society, do you think that family is perhaps, and their support, love, and being proud and supportive of youngsters, is that one of the key things that has contributed to your success?
Yeah, I think so. I think regardless of cultures, family still remains quite an important variable, in how we progress, how we grow, and what we do. And of course, over a period of time, the values are changing, the way we look at family is changing. Certainly, it varies by cultures and depending on where we come from. Where I came from, it was quite important, but not sort of as important as many other places I've seen. Personally, for me, it's been quite important. And like I said, because I had a background or an environment in which I grew, which was quite, family oriented, that helped. I think the second point you made was resilience, and I think that's really important. And that is important regardless of whether you're successful or whether you take a few hard knocks. And in fact, I would put resilience and tenacity as these sort of very important attributes that everybody needs to have, regardless of whether they want to be a leader, whether they want to join the corporate world or any other profession. Because the reality is, like, life throws lots of things at you, right? So there's different things, whether it's in education or whether it's in other aspects of life, family circumstances, there are a whole lot of things. So I think ability to just sort of stand and never give up and be able to fight back, if you like, in a positive way, to be able to actually put in the effort, put in the hard yards to bounce back, very important. In fact, as it happens, just yesterday I was at the Liverpool stadium, where there was a big Liverpool game and they came back 4-0. And guess what Mohamed Salah was wearing on his t-shirt? Never give up, right?
Yes.
And they never gave up. So I think whether in sport or whether in profession, the never giving up is a very important thing.
I agree entirely, and I have learned a lot by watching sports events, although the example last night was a painful one because we support Barcelona. So congratulations, Rahul.
That's
very pleased for you.
Yeah.
And my hat off to Liverpool for their resilience.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's not only sport, it happens in every aspect of life, right? If you think of great leaders, they've really been able to stand the test of adversity. So if you think of Gandhi, he took test adversity and he stood up like a rock, right? And you look at Mandela. So you could go leader after leader and you would find that resilience, persistence, ability to actually is tenacity. These are attributes which are at the foundation of great leadership, I think.
Absolutely. And you learned that lesson so young, so early on. So
Yeah.
in some ways that failure was probably quite helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I wish, however, that not everybody needs to go through that, and you don't have to go through a big failure to learn. But just framing it. The other important lesson I've learned is that no matter what our circumstances are, if you're on video today and somebody's watching this video, they're really living a privileged life. There are 100 things which are not right, but we have to focus on the 10 things which are right. And actually, you will often then find out that there are 110 things which are right. So, when there are things happening around us in the world, which seem like, they seem very difficult, very challenging, the reality is that we have a unique privilege to be able to live on this planet. If you're watching the video, or this discussion that we're having, I think that itself is a huge privilege, because...
Absolutely. And if we look at the components of what is resilience, thinking positively, being able to imagine positive outcomes and then really going for it despite all the challenges and difficulties is a key feature of resilience. But I want to ask you, what you learned as a young person about being resilient. You succeeded in demonstrating your resilience, getting up from that single event when you were young and going on to forge an illustrious career at Unilever. Throughout your career, were there a couple of points where once again you needed to use that resilience that you learned early on?
Yes, I think several times. Several times, I would say. I mean, not just once or twice, but pretty much, every now and then. Because business is also quite hard. Actually, it's quite competitive. You are accountable for results. You are actually our company is a great company because we serve everyday needs of everyday people, and therefore, pretty much have to be very focused on doing that, on being customer centric, and in the process, you naturally make a few mistakes. And some of them are serious, some of them are not as serious, and all along I think the real important thing to remember is, are you taking lessons out of it? I always believe that regardless of who we become, regardless of who we are, we got to be lifelong students. So I'd like to be called a lifelong student, and then always in the learning mode. One, learning from your own experience, and two, learning from others' experiences. Because if I've made a mistake, it's one thing and I must learn from it. But equally, if I've seen some other people making a mistake, then I must also be able to reflect on that and learn from it so that I don't make that mistake again. Very often what we do is, we say, no, we have to make the mistake. We don't have to. If we can learn from others' mistakes, it comes even cheaper for us, the learning. So we have to keep that learning mindset all the time, observation, reflection and learning. And so the way I see it is, the younger you are, more important, certainly when I reflect on my past, the ability to just soak it in, to absorb it becomes very important. You just hang loose sometimes and soak it in. Sometimes you're actively engaged and soak it in. But regardless of that, you just have to absorb. And later, you never know when you can actually use those chips and they come handy in terms of your experience and learning and reflection.
Absolutely. And I think one of the challenges that the new generation has is that in the digital age, they see people rapidly rising and succeeding, and they don't always see the hard work, failure and resilience that goes behind the scenes. Inevitably young people are going to fail, but they need to be resilient. What are your recommendations to young people in terms of how to fail? What should they do once they do fail? What should their approach and attitude be in, for instance, articulating that failure to others, owning up to the failure, collaborating? Other tips you would have on how to fail so that the outcome can actually be positive?
Yeah, I think I take a step back. A lot of it starts by framing the ambition. And I'd always encourage people to shoot high. I'd encourage them to have a high degree of ambition in whatever field they choose. It doesn't have to be business, it doesn't have to be sport, it doesn't have to be a social service. But whatever you do, one must have an ambition which is to excel. And once you set the goal very high, then chances are you're not going to hit it all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to understand that in order to hit a high goal, in order to achieve your high ambition, you have to firstly, of course, be talented, but equally work hard. And in the process, if you shoot for the sky and end up a few inches short, it's okay. And you always get another chance, because the reality is that we live so many different aspects of our life for a long period of time that it's never over. You can just try your hand at something else. I started my career, like I was explaining to you, in a manner of speaking, in the corporate life, not by choice at that point in time, but by default. And even within the corporate life, I started in finance and I lead digital now. And in between, I did sales and I did commercial, and I was a part of different functions. So each way along the way, you never know what comes your way. I've been fortunate, and indeed, there are many others who've been fortunate. And I consider it fortunate, but it's not just fortune alone. You have to create the good luck for yourself, And you create the good luck for yourself, in my view, by aiming high and then working hard towards it in a focused way.
That's a fantastic tip to give to our young people. I would like our young people to realize that they have a long career ahead of them, a long life ahead of them, and that they have to take the long view and take the successes and failures together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what intrigues me always is how people make a success of migrating to a different country. And in your case, in my case, and others, migrating from a different continent to another continent,
Yeah.
India to the UK.
Yeah.
I know that you migrated as a very senior executive in Unilever, but what was it like migrating from Unilever Hindustan to Unilever in London?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's an interesting question, and I've often thought about this. So, my first experience of getting into migrating, if you like, or going to another place was in Singapore, which is a very developed country, quite a contrast from India, right? Dramatically different, in fact. And I think on reflection, whether it was Singapore or whether moving to London, even if I'm senior and I'm working in a corporation, I think the emotional aspects of moving to another place remain the same, right? So as a reflection, for example, we could never for a long period of time call Singapore home. And just about when we thought Singapore was becoming home, then we had to move again to London. And we've been here 3 years. So I think there is an aspect of emotional attachment which is difficult, to sort of think of. And that by far is important. The second is cultural sensitivity, right? Because I had the unique privilege of working across a number of geographies when I was in Singapore, in fact all of Asia, and all cultures are different. So as all cultures are different, having a sensitivity to nuances of each of the culture becomes important. And when you migrate, you quite often find that you're actually in a foreign land, which means the culture around you is a particular and you try and become a part of that in some ways. I would say that the emotional aspects related to migrating are more important than anything else. There is no formula for it. You have to experience it. You have to integrate yourself into society a little bit while keeping your roots, actually, because in many ways you have to keep the roots. I'm still a passionate cricket fan, for example. Thankfully enough, cricket is a great sport in England as well. And equally, so there are aspects of your life which you just can't forget because you've grown up with those, or your family, still hear from people, parents, or people around you. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think for me that brings us on to the question of authenticity. How does one keep authenticity and their origins while learning to mix with the new societies that they have joined and integrate?
Yeah.
How does one do that successfully while flexing our style in accordance with the audience that we work with and live with?
No, that's a great question. It's in my book, it's really important to be yourself. I have never been any other way, and touch wood, it's worked out well for me. It's very important to be yourself all the way. The way I like to think about it is, I call it and I learned that early in life thanks to a few mentors, that it's important to know what your North Star is, what you're all about, what really motivates you. So in my case, I was very attached to social impact. I was very attached to, the country. I was very attached to service. So that kind of, helps me frame my North Star. And as long as the North Star is clear, it helps to be authentic and to be absolutely true to yourself. And in the process, you have to be flexible, you have to be adaptable, you have to change with the times. You can't be stubborn and stick with what you believe, even if it's irrelevant. Now that is a balance which one has to strike between not being too flexible, where you let go of your values or your North Star, or for that matter being totally stubborn, where you don't adapt at all to the environment. I think it comes with experience, and it's fair to say that as a younger person, I was more stubborn, if you like, more determined, more focused, and at the same time less flexible. And as I've grown over the years, been exposed to different stimuli, different interactions with different kind of people, I have learned over a period of time to be more flexible, to be more understanding, be more compassionate. These are words which I didn't use that easily when I was 20-year-old. They grew with me over time, and as I began to observe and see what's happening, it came to the fore. But the real important thing for me is about anchoring to the North Star and then making sure that all actions are not compromising on values, whatever they might be, and they vary between different people, but the core substance of yourself, you have to be absolutely authentic about.
Absolutely, and that should really remain the same, the core values,
Yeah.
throughout our lives. Although we learn, we flex our style, we adapt, we change course, but the core values remain the same.
Yeah.
Um, when looking at navigating the corporate cultures in Singapore versus India versus London and the UK, what were some of the key differences in corporate culture that you have observed even within Unilever? And how did you handle that?
Yeah, I think the way see Singapore and is firstly a melting pot of many subcultures, because it's essentially a large number of people who come into Singapore come from different parts of the world, many of them from Asia, but even other parts of the world, and therefore a unique subculture itself gets created, right? I think my reflection is that in India, relative to everywhere else, people are enormously hardworking, and they have a whole lot of stress and strife in life, which is very, very high order. Now, equally, in other places also people think the same way. It's not like people in Singapore don't see it the same way, except that in comparison, I think there's much more hardship, much more hard work, much more tenacity and different kind of working style in India. It comes right from education days and grows with you. In the case of Singapore, it's a transient population. Everybody is there for 3-4 years, and therefore nobody is ever fully committed to in any form to whether. So relationships are transient, and you kind of move on. So I think in a way, therefore, it doesn't really allow for long and strong relationships to be built. Of course, you still end up having a few, but the population being transient actually makes a big impact. I think London's got terrific culture. It is a global, truly global city. It's huge, and even within Unilever, it's large. It's a global headquarters. So we have amazing people all around the company, whether it's India, Singapore, and here. But on reflection, I would say that these three operate differently. There is a greater degree of formality. There's a greater degree of COP, because it's also the global headquarters. A different kind of an operating style over it, which you have to adjust to.
Tips and recommendations to the young people of today, particularly those based in the UK, whether in London or outside London. If a young person from a very ordinary or lower socioeconomic backgrounds wanted to get into Unilever, wanted to get into the big corporates, is, let's say, between the age of 16 and 21, what are the top tips that you have for them?
Yeah, in my experience, all large corporates, by and large, have very strong meritocratic systems. Therefore, the first message I would like to give to everybody is that everyone has a shot at making it, right? So you have a chance, really speaking. The second reality is that there is always going to be hard competition. Therefore, you have to compete, and if you have to compete, you have to prepare yourself well. You have to train yourself well. You have to study hard. You have to get the good grades. You have to do good in sports or whatever else are your other passions. My experience is that young people are, generally speaking, these days very well rounded, and therefore that has become table stakes. So it's not a differentiating factor anymore that one is well rounded and the other is not, because everybody is well rounded. Everybody is getting good marks. Everybody is hardworking. Everybody is committed. Everything that you can actually tick off, everyone else has. So therefore, if you're a young person or who's wanting to make a mark in big companies, even to enter, you have to think of what's your X factor, what is special about you, which others may not. Now, in some cases, it is about community service. In some cases, about leadership positions. But again, demonstrating passion, that you genuinely care about it, that you're going that extra mile, becomes very important. Because the stakes are much higher today, competitive stakes, and this is the reality. So you have to work hard. I always say, in fact, I mentor a few young people, and I'm always absolutely inspired by the amount of effort that they're able to put in, the amount of energy that they have, the amount of maturity that they have, exponentially higher than what we used to do. And yet there are 24 hours in a day. That reality hasn't changed, right? Being compassionate is very important, because when you're young and you're working all this hard and you're so focused on your career, you can quite easily forget whether it is family, whether it is society you come from. So having an understanding of those elements, curiosity. So there are so many different factors. But again, if you tick off all the boxes, you must still have something that is extra special about you, which enables, certainly when you get to a stage where it is an interview or a group discussion or some other process, for you to stand out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Rahul, it's been an amazing privilege to speak with you, to hear your views and your tips for our young people. Are there any final last words that you'd like to share with our
No,
young
I think
people?
absolutely. I think just it's important to stay positive. So I would encourage everyone to think of positivity as the absolute foundation on which they grow everything else. And the career runway, whether whichever profession one chooses, is going to be great. It's just that you have to be focused and you have to keep working hard to convert that into a reality, because opportunities are there. Conversion is the important part.
What a fantastic results-driven message to end with. Rahul, it's been a pleasure and my privilege to speak with you. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.